is no magic formula really to this. I think everyone chooses their own path when they're starting with real estate, but I can only speak from my own experience. So I have 3 questions that I typically go over, and that's number 1 is, are you an end user or are you an investor? Number 2 is, are you a cash buyer or are you a mortgage buyer? And then at last, I would say, how much capital do you actually want to inject into the property? So those are the 3 things that I would look at. And I did actually the same as when I was doing this. So when I moved to Dubai and I had enough capital, I decided to buy my first property. And I went through these 3 questions myself. So, and I can share this as well here so people can kind of relate, right? So number 1, I was an end user because I wanted to move into the property, obviously. And for me, it was very important to be close to my office space. So I decided to buy somewhere near the office. Number 2 was I was a mortgage buyer. So I didn't have enough cash to buy outright. So I actually had to go through the pre-approval process and get my loan. And number 3, I actually decided to put in around 350,000 dirhams at the time, which is around $100,000. And that way I could also understand what type of property I'm able to buy, what's the budget for my property. So those were the steps that I went. But most people do actually say that, you know, I'm an end user, but I'm also an investor, right? In real estate, we're all trying to have capital gains. We're all trying to have a high ROI property. However, when you're an end user, you typically have different needs. So an end user could be a family that's looking to live in Arabian ranches, for example, because their kids go to school nearby. An end user could be a couple that might want to live in Dubai Marina because of their lifestyle. They want to be close to restaurants. So end users typically focus on location based on their needs, while investors tend to have a different approach. So an investor could, for example, be looking at solely high ROI, right? So they might go into JVC, get their 8% ROI, and that's what's important to them. They could also be buying through the developer because their cash flow is not as persistent. So they might look at payment plans. And typically investors, very savvy investors, they look at very strategic locations. So it could be Dubai Marina, it could be the Palm, it could be somewhere in downtown or something quite unique. So that's really what's important to them. Well, typically with cash purchases, you have 3 methods here in Dubai. Number 1, that's going through the developer directly, right? And you can be assisted by an agency like us or any other agency. That's a very simple route. Number 2 is to actually buy a resale property, which is still with the developer. And number 3 would be the traditional ways to just buy a ready property from a reseller, right? A private reseller. Now, the fees associated with these are typically your 4% and your 2%. So 4% land department fees and 2% agency fees. You typically also have like a small fee, like an admin fee that comes to that. So always calculate with around 4.5%. Unless you're buying directly from the developer, where you don't pay an agency fee, and sometimes the developers give you an offer. But when you're buying with the financing or mortgage, you typically need 20% down payment and 80% comes from the bank. They've actually changed that quite recently. It used to be 25-75, which has also led to the growth here in the real estate market in Dubai. Now 20% on a property like 2 million dirhams, that's 400,000 dirhams, but you also have to count with the fees, right? So always make sure you have at least 2% more than the 20%, and the rest can typically be borrowed from the bank, your 4% and 2% DLD fee. When you're buying a property over 5 million, that ratio changes. You actually need 30% down payment. So on a 5 million dirham property, you're looking at around 1.5 million, but counting that 2% as well, you would need around 1.6 million as a down payment, and the bank would give the rest. So when you're buying in the primary market, you're obviously buying it directly to the developer, right? Now, some of the benefits are that you don't have to pay 2% agency fee, which is fantastic. You also don't pay DLD fees when the developer have offers on it, right? So there could be a 2% waiver or a 4% waiver, depending on the market conditions. Some other benefits are that you get a 10-year structural warranty and a 1-year MEP warranty that covers mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which is quite important on the inside of the apartment. You also have simple payment plans, which is quite great for investors. They could be post-payment plans. They could also just be basic 50-50 payment plans, depending on the market conditions again. And of course, nowadays developers tend to use better materials as well. So it could be double glazing on the windows, or it could be a better flooring, better kitchens, etc. So that could be some of the benefits as well. Now, on the other side, you have disadvantages. So, for instance, you're buying a villa and your land is smaller, or you're buying an apartment and the apartment is smaller. As the supply is changing in the market with land, developers tend to make things a little bit smaller to have more profits. Now, another downside could be, which is quite important, is to make sure you do your due diligence, is that the contractor could default and the project could get stalled, right? Or could get even cancelled. So it's very important to do your due diligence. It's probably the most important thing when buying off plan. Another risk is that the developer actually delays the project by 3 to 4 years. And then you're just standing there with no income, and you cannot even sell the property because everyone knows the project's being delayed so much. So when you're buying a property in the secondary market, that means that you're obviously buying a ready property. You actually, a lot of people love the viewing process. So going from one apartment to the next, or from one villa to the next. And another interesting thing is that a lot of owners may have upgraded their property. So that could be a huge benefit to some people that don't want to deal with the headaches. Another thing is that you get exactly what you see, right? While in off-plan, you have to wait and you don't know and you're guessing. In ready, you actually buy exactly what you see. Now, some of the disadvantages would be that you always have to pay 2% agency fee. You always have to pay 4% DLD, that's like a given. So those are your 6% fees always calculated. And there could be that the property needs a lot of work. So you may like a certain tower or a certain villa, but you actually need to come in and do quite a bit of work. One thing to also consider is that sellers in a very strong market tend to be quite flaky, they tend to be quite greedy. So you might struggle with negotiations. You may have the right offer, but you may still lose the property. So that can be quite tedious as well. So I tried obviously covering quite a lot of the breakdowns and some of the minor details. However, there's so much more in real estate that you guys need to know. And if you do want more technical advice and you want to jump into more details, please feel free to give me a call or give my team a call at McCone Properties. Thank you.